fine, right?
Yes, I hear
Awesome.
you perfect.
Okay, so we're doing this podcast. Today we have Iona. How do I pronounce your last name? That's a
Oh boy. Yeah, that's a tricky question. Mantzouridou. Mantzouridou.
Mantzouridou. I hope I got that right. So
Yeah.
let me backtrack a little bit, right? So we met through OpenBC, correct?
Yeah. Yes, correct.
And you have a product. You will tell us more about it, but basically it's an AI coaching platform. Right.
Yes.
So, how about we delve a little bit in your background and then what your company, Dextego, is doing? And, let's go with the flow with that.
Absolutely, Imran. Background wise, so originally I'm from Greece. I came in the States 8 years ago. I came originally for school, so I did my studies in psychology and communications, then my master in talent development and strategic management. And that's when it happened that, I was looking for a graduate assistantship and I applied with different professors, got matched with Professor Tariq. He's the chair of the management department at Pace University, and he introduced me to the world of HR. And we were doing research on A players and high potential employees and what it takes to motivate them, to develop them. And I got fascinated by that I thought I was going to do my PhD in organizational psychology actually right after. But it happened that I got an internship in the startup and then started to explore the startup world and loved it. Prior to that, before I continue more, I was actually in fashion, very different. I had a company back home in Greece with my sister, and it was all about handmade clothes and accessories. So always, entrepreneurial, but in a different way, not SaaS, not AI. And so, yeah, that internship turned out to be an amazing opportunity. I then became the VP of People and Chief of Staff at Aptivio, which is a revenue AI solution. And that's where I got exposed more into the AI world and understood all sides of the business, from investor relations to like building a product to CS and what it really takes to scale a team. And through my role, I was basically hiring the right people to build a team, hiring from like Lisbon, New York, Hong Kong, Paris. And I quickly understood the value of soft skills through that process,
Mhm.
but also the challenge that comes in developing them. And to me, soft skills can make or break someone's career. To give you, a very silly example, it could be that you have a very talented person. Usually, like they say, technical people don't have as many soft skills, for instance. I think generally that can not always be the case, but let's say take an example of an engineer that struggles in presenting themselves during an interview. They
Yeah.
might miss out, on an amazing opportunity. Or someone more introverted that, for instance, is afraid of going to a conference, and they
Yeah.
might miss on that amazing potential partnership with someone. So I really think that no matter your industry and role, these are crucial skills. But reflecting, on where do we get them from, how we can develop them, I understood that the fault, if you wish, is not so much on the businesses, rather on the education side of things.
Hmm.
But whether we like it or not, education is a field that's very slow. And I've collaborated with many professors and educators, and we actually wrote a book on reinventing education. So my approach was, let's not go through them first. Let's go through the enterprise, through companies that are seeking to develop the talent fast,
Mhm.
proving that this can be done and soft skills are something you can teach, and then making a use case to go back to education and say, hey, you need to include this in your curriculum. And that's how you can do it easily with a software. So long story short, that's the background. I can dive into more, on how Dexter got created, but I'll pause to
Y-
see if you want to react on anything.
Yeah, no, this is actually pretty cool. I think two things I took away that you were in fashion, so that's pretty cool. The reason for that is actually my previous startup was One Avenue. So we started from the music and fashion industry. And
Yeah.
it's something it's always I wanted to get into, but there's so many guardrails and you're probably familiar with how that industry is. It's a little bit too much guarded, a lot of gated, even if you want to go into that space, but technology is really hard. Not that that was a conversation, but just want to share some background there. The second thing I like what you're talking about, right? So one thing that stood out is the soft skill part. So now in the world of AI, right, everybody can be 3x or 10x of what they are. There'll be GPT store coming out, or it's going to be released
Mhm.
by the time this podcast is out. Tell me about how you're leveraging Dextego, right, as a platform and helping people, double, triple down on their soft skills, because then you're tapping into their emotion quotient, technically, right?
Yes. Yeah, so exactly right on why now is the best timing, because more and more with AI taking over the technical side of things, there is such a true need for soft skills to arise. Like the best engineers will be the ones that can collaborate with the non-technical people. The best marketers will be the ones with the biggest empathy. The best salespeople will be consultants, people that can
Yeah.
create trust. So how we do it is we have built in an emotion engine that understands how you say what you say,
Mhm.
your sentiment, your eyesight, your confidence, your positivity, and we give you scenario-based challenges based on your role in industry. So we could take simply the example of sales. Let's say you have an AE that is working on a deal. We're connected to their CRM, so we know, for instance, is John, SVP at Coca-Cola. We
Mhm.
say, hey, when John says that they don't have enough budget, how do you handle this objection, for instance? You record yourself through video, and by analyzing your sentiment and your content, it gives you feedback back on what you did great and what you can continue to improve on. Now, this over time helps us create your coachability profile, your score on how fast you develop, meaning how coachable you are, if you're taking into account the feedback of the AI coach or you're saying the same. And by understanding your strengths and weaknesses, so which skills you really have to work on, we give you more challenges according to that. So it's an adaptive learning experience that each individual has that's not just personalized for them, but also for the organization. Like we understand what the organizational data is, integrating to existing systems, existing trainings they might have, to
Mhm.
make it more actionable. Because the problem with current learning solutions as like a learning management system is that they're very static. They're the same
Yeah.
for everyone, right? Like the same leadership course everyone else will take.
Mhm.
And it's not on demand. And that's the biggest thing. Like when me as an employee have an issue, I want the answer now. I don't want it 3 days
Yeah.
later. My client is yelling at me right now on the phone. So it's really that. It's a 24/7 coach available for you when you need it, that adapts based on your evolvement, because we all evolve in our careers. And lastly, it really has a B2C look and feel, although it's a
Mhm.
B2B product. So the user is always in our focus, and in particularly a Gen Z or a millennial user that likes the interaction, likes the
Yeah.
micro learning, the gamification, and doesn't just want to sit, and watch a 2-hour video to try
Yeah.
figure out how to improve.
That's actually interesting because, when I will not name the companies, but the companies that I work for, they're like, complete this course. And I'm like,
Yeah,
and I'll be honest, there's a hack to it that you really don't have to do the course. You just go through, the answers and how to put it. It's a checkbox for them. They're not really
exactly,
investing, right? And so your
exactly.
system is more personalized for an individual. So let's say we are Acme Corporation. Like, I'm just gonna
Mhm.
name a fancy one, right? And they will have a system in place using Dexago to build personalized solution for each of their employees who are in management, or would that be individuals as well who are just IC roles as well?
So the what we see now is that the need is more in the entry level, middle level managers.
Hmm.
On a technical standpoint, I mean, anyone could use it, but what we see is that a lot of companies are struggling with getting the first-time managers
Yeah.
upskill because they're dealing with so many conflicts as a first-time manager. They have to develop their team while delivering, and it's a lot going on. So we see the pain point there mostly.
So, so in a nutshell, if you look at this, right, so it's a problem that you're tackling is very interesting. How would you then go about building it? So tell us a little bit more about, because I'm always interested in the how part, and I'm sure people who will listen and watch this, how does it work? Meaning, how is this coach modeled or trained? Like, tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, sure. I mean, initially to build AI, no matter who, like you need to base it on something. So very early days, we leveraged GPT, BART, many different models to understand which reacts better on which challenges, which answers, and of course fine tuning for the use case of soft skills, moderate it, make sure the content looks good before the end user sees it. Now we are at the stage that we have an AI cluster built in that we're growing over time, of course, and the goal is to just depend on that or on data from our users. We actually have a green data center that my co-founder and CTO built in New Jersey. So we're also trying to be mindful of making it very eco-friendly or as eco-friendly as you can, at least,
Yeah.
because it is a lot of data at the end of the day we're tracking. And then it depends on the company's needs. So you can use Dextego as it is. You could also, as I said, fine tune it. So we have companies that are giving us a lot of their existing
Hmm.
internal data. Like the bigger enterprises tend to have a lot of corporate training programs and other human coaches they leverage, for instance. So it depends on their focus. We can for instance, edit the soft skills that the system develops. Like you have a sales team that you want to upskill, they care more about negotiation or
Yeah.
conflict resolution, just communication. You have maybe a marketing team, they want to build creativity. So it just depends on the scope. And then something that was very important for us is how the user consumes the information. Is it through a widget, the Chrome extension?
Yeah.
How can we make it easy for them to use it daily? Because at the end of the day, that's the most important thing to make it a habit. But also, how do we show that usage and progress to an admin, like their
Hmm.
HR manager or their CEO or their manager, whoever that could be? So we take all that data per team, we analyze the average coachability of the team, how that improves over time, any increase in the specific soft skills, and we now can start seeing trends per team and compare those teams. So
Hmm.
how is sales versus marketing in leadership?
Yeah.
And what do the data tell us about your company? What does the data tell us? Like, what leadership styles are you missing to have that perfect culture? Or how fast does someone ramp up on X skill to give you ideas on how now you should structure your hiring strategy and have a better, basically data-driven approach to generally your HR plan. I think that's something that a lot of companies are missing. Like depending on who you ask, they give you
Yeah.
different answers, right? But
Yeah.
what's the truth? The truth is in the data.
So, want to shift a gear a little bit and talk about the Gen Z. So, they're different than millennials, right? And like, I don't know how to describe it, but I would leave it up to you because I want to be mindful. But when you look at Gen Z, right, so most of them are starting their own businesses, number one. That's something I've read. I cannot really quote, but I think I've read this in Bloomberg or Forbes. So that's number one. Number two, they have different work ethics. If not work ethics, they're more focused on, better work-life balance and nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
They have different expectations. They also have different kind of soft skills that may and may not have. When you
Mhm.
reflect the work that you're doing, I guess if you can give your perspective about this, because this will be technically your product that's going to be out here being used will be used by 90% Gen Z, possibly millennials as well, who are stepping up, who were always IC, right? But yeah, what would you say about that?
Yes, super interesting the contrast that you gave. Like you have some that are building their companies, which you would assume have lots of like endurance and like the skills that we know entrepreneurs need, versus the ones that are seeking work-life balance, which
Yeah,
might mean less time at work and more time spent outside and creative things. So this is indeed a reality. Like I think it's kind of a dichotomy, which is very interesting. Like on the one hand, I'll talk about first the Gen Z at work. These are people who are changing the status quo, that are saying enough is enough. Like if you don't have L&D to offer to me and you don't develop me as a person and then as a professional to deliver results, I'm leaving. So you see a huge like leverage on the employee standpoint, and it's not even a trend now. Like this has been for some time, where the attrition rates are increasing because of how easy it is for them to say, hey, I could be working for myself now, I don't need you, versus maybe previous generations that had a higher barrier to entry. Like they didn't have all these solutions available, they didn't have all these free accelerators and programs to get advice from. So that to me has a pro and a con. The con is that it actually decreases their negotiation skills, because they're not using this to truly fight for a change. They're
yeah,
just saying, okay, I'm going to the easy path. But it's easy
yeah,
in the short term. It's easy to start something, but how much are you going to scale it and execute is
yeah,
another issue. We're not
yep.
going to talk about it now. But I think that's the biggest generational gap I see, that the younger Gen Z now are not fully fighting to change the
Mm,
status quo. They're saying, I'm
yeah,
tired, I'm just moving out of this picture. And I see, because I'm also like mentoring a lot of other female founders, and I'm trying to get them to understand that it's very hard to do anything that creates value in this world, but you have to go through like the uncomfort and the pushing back. If you
yeah,
just pivot, then you're not really doing anything. On the other hand, you see Gen Z that have super good initiatives, and they know how to bring the right people around them to create community.
mhm,
And that is a huge, huge value add, because everything now is community driven. Not just education, sales is community driven, everything is
mhm,
going to community. So I think they have a tremendous asset there that previous generations don't. They're more like isolated, it's more on an individual basis. And the work-life balance thing is actually great, because they're pushing for mental health, they're taking care of themselves, so they're more productive, and they know how to say no. No, I'm not gonna do this extra thing for you. It's, past my time, which sucks for the employer,
yeah,
but at least they're taking care of themselves, and that creates a more sustainable career, I think, versus like killing yourself for 5-10 years, getting to a partner level and then not wanting to
yeah,
go to work. So it's not perfect. I think, again, pros and cons are everywhere. But on the entrepreneur side, I think the Gen Z I see are super creative. Like they can think outside of the box. But because, and I put myself into this because I'm also a Gen Z.
yeah,
I'm 25, and I think that a lot, because jump so fast in entrepreneurship and might like the years of experience, they miss out certain things. I was like privileged to work at a startup before,
yeah,
but you see all these kids like go to YC, after high school or not even finishing college, and then they're either being taken advantage by like more senior people that know what they're doing,
Yeah.
or it's just I think there is a step missing in general. And the problem that we see today is that these generations, instead of collaborating and creating something amazing, are kind of disassociating themselves because they're like, oh, you're like this, or you're like that, or you don't get me, or you're too much about D&I and you're not. And
Yeah.
it's not creating, in my opinion, something nice. Like, it's creating lots of challenges at work, and I don't want the world to end up being, a bunch of young people in startups and a bunch of older people in like
Yeah.
big enterprises. Like, we
Yeah.
need to coexist. and
Yeah.
and I think that's where soft skills come in, being able to explain and express yourself by gaining self-awareness first, being able to have open dialogues and negotiate and just have a win-win situation so both can be productive at the same workplace.
So why do you think that is? Like Gen Zs are more like we don't give a shit. We will do what we want to do. Like like I have seen that from the side. And don't you think that the drive is a bit different? Because then there's a bunch of Gen Zs that are, let's say, not even take YC, like, let's take everyone who is an entrepreneur, who is a founder. They're like, I'm gonna write my own story, which is good. But then not everybody is gonna be a founder, right? There'll be a lot of folks who are gonna try something, be like, I'm better off working for Meta or a good startup. I have a stable income. But do you think in that specific area, those who are working for other people or other companies are not that much dedicated? Like, how can companies have that trust? Because here's what I'm trying to say. When I work for a company, right,
Mhm.
I'm giving them, some people will say it's toxic, but I give them my time beyond the 8 hours. I
Yeah.
go the extra mile because it's very competitive, right? And the more higher up you go, it's always getting competitive. Then you have some politics, you have some storyline that's happening on the sidelines that you have to,
Mhm.
play
Mhm.
as well. How are Gen Z gonna tackle this? Because of course they're gonna be climbing up the ladder as well. Like, I just want to get a perspective on that sense because I believe your product, coming back to your product, Dextego, when it comes to soft skills, I think it's a great fit there when they're climbing up the ladder. They're like, hey, you know what? How should I deal with my manager, ask for a raise, or I have a conflict with my manager? I've been in that position where I had a
Yeah.
challenge with the president of the company. And then there was SVP, and I was like, shit, now I have to resolve it somehow.
Mhm.
How would they do it? Right. I think, what do you think about that? Like, do you think that's gonna become a challenge for them going forward?
I think to answer your first part of the question, we need to take a step back and see the macro. Like, what is the environment within which Gen Z is entering the workplace and trying to make a name for themselves? It's an environment with a lot of chaos around us, and COVID and wars and layoffs. And if they are entering a place where immediately there's fear, there's toxicity,
Hmm.
and they feel unsafe, put yourself in their shoes. Why would they want to give everything they have to an employer when their job is not guaranteed? They
Yeah.
cannot clearly see a career path. They're like, oh, hold on, I have to protect myself. I have to have a side gig. I have to network, and to do all these things, you need time. So
Hmm.
they're like, you're paying me enough for 8 hours. I need to make sure I have a future. So let me do that at the side. On the other hand, you have employers that are in such a difficult also economic environment that are just trying to survive, and they don't have the bandwidth to give more to the employees in terms of
Hmm.
spend 101 and tell them how great they are and give them stock options. And it's becoming hard for both parties, and unfortunately it takes both parties to make a safe environment and culture that they want to be more dedicated to.
Hmm.
So I don't think like it's one factor, it's a lot of
Yeah.
external factors that play into this. But to your point, L&D can be a true catalyst, and I think now we see it more than ever that CEOs don't have a choice. Like, they have to provide the safety, or else they won't have
Yeah.
employees to work for them. And to do that, they need to understand that the solution you're providing is not just a checkbox, like you were saying earlier, and it's a true solution that can help them both as people and as professionals, because the skills are transferable. And exactly the example you shared was perfect, because that's the on-demand type of issue you might have, like, oh, my manager said that, or hey, I got a new hire, they seem very slow in getting onboarded, how do I deal with this so it doesn't look like it's my fault? Like, there's all these interpersonal issues that arise at the workplace that without excellent soft skills, nothing will be resolved. And lastly, I think it's about purpose and passion. I think a lot of Gen Z haven't found that,
Hmm.
and they jump into the first opportunity they see.
Yeah.
And that is also creating confusion, and then they don't have that marketability to find the right job. And it's more like, okay, I need to just do something to pay my bills. But unless you see the vision of where you're trying to go and truly like try to create the profile to get there, it's going to be very hard. And because of all the layoffs and uncertainties, I think they were pushed to do other things and now are striving to go back to work.
Yeah.
And there's this big talent war going on. You have bunch of recruiters out there trying to find talent, but they can't.
Yeah.
Where is the talent is the question. So I think that the new world won't be about where is the talent. It will be how can we get whoever we get and turn them into an A player. So it's more on the developing than on the acquiring, because I fully agree with you that the talented, they're actually starting their businesses. They're trying to make it for themselves. That's where we are today.
Yeah. And one thing when I was a kid, my dad told me it's like not everybody can be the owner. And so if everybody is the owner, then who is working for who? Like the
Mhm.
whole balance of universe changes, right? So I want to change a little bit and change the topic and talk more about the startup journey that you have right now. And I guess what would help us, those who are listening or watching, is being a founder. Let me give some context. I've been founder 3 times. The second company I don't count, but I only talk about the first two. The middle one was basically the voice activation when before Hey Siri and Hey Google happened, but it didn't happen when through. I got an equity higher offer, but I was like too egoistic to decline. Bottom line.
Mm.
But it's hard to build a company, right? It's very hard to build a startup. And the reason I'm asking and posing this question to you, 2023 has been a challenging year for not startups, all
Zim.
companies, right? Like in general, it's like you throw a rock, every company had a problem. In this environment, someone who is starting their own company, maybe even a small business, right? You know,
Yeah.
what would you say are the key challenges they should be, aware of? And if someone is starting their company today, like let's
Mhm.
say, imagine someone listens up and they're like, hey, I'm going to start, and they listen to you. What is it that you would say is like, hey, be mindful of these 3 things, 4 things, or have this homework done, or this is what investors look for?
Yeah, big question. Big question. Um, I will share also something about myself, and I'll answer these, because when I had the idea, I went to my CEO at the time and I said, "Hey, I'm thinking of doing this.
Mhm.
What do you think?" And it turned out to be that he really believed in it. He became our first angel investor and then our first client. So I think it's super important to have someone next to you that believes in you, whether this is your co-founder, whether it's a professor you had, a teacher, and like anybody. I think it's super hard to go against everyone and say, I'm doing this, and if
Yeah.
you don't believe in me, goodbye. Super hard, because anyway, some people won't believe in you, but at least you have 2, 5 people next to you that see the vision and they are there to support you. And I've been very grateful and blessed to have both a technical co-founder who were very aligned and the support of my previous boss. Now, on that role, I think community that I touched on earlier is so important. And what does community for a startup mean? Means great advisors that are experts in their fields. That was one of the first things I did, was build an advisory board of HR and talent experts, AI experts, and gather feedback on the prototype, talk to clients constantly or potential clients, because this is the fastest way you'll ever go to market, to validate every step of the way. So I think understanding, even if you don't know exactly your ICP from the get-go, understanding kind of like, okay, who we think could be potentially a user,
Yeah.
and talking to them and getting as much feedback. It's why we were able to build the product so fast. Like we launched 1st of June with a full-on beta. We incorporate the company back in January. So all that time was building, testing, asking for feedback, and knowing that once we launch, this is something people can use and would love to use. So definitely these two founding team advisory board has to be super strong. And I don't mean it with like logos and like people that have worked in the best places, but people that get your space and get you and you want to work with. The thing that obviously VCs care about is revenue, and it's becoming more and more evident this year. Whether you're a pre-seed stage company or not, you have to have shown traction and revenue, and that you're able to retain clients. In our case, I mean, it's an annual subscription. We haven't been too long in the market, so there's no like churn. But if you're someone that's a month-to-month type of solution, you have to prove that you have something sticky. Now, the other thing is truly understanding the market, the competition, and your moat. I think that that's something extremely hard for early stage startups, because truly, even if you think you have product market fit, you don't till like Series B, in my opinion. Like you can't prove it because you don't have enough user base.
Yeah.
And so I think when investors ask this question, I mean, you obviously give an answer with what you know now, but I don't think it's enough. I think there's new competitors coming out like all the time, and I think that your competitor is another startup that you don't know of. It's not a big company. So when you do these matrices, and so okay, you know, these companies were different because of that, it's very vague. I understand obviously the need to do it, but I would say for a founder that's starting, to not get intimidated by the competition, because to me today, in 23, 24 now, there is no space that's not crowded.
Yeah.
And in 5 years also, that will be even more evident. So the differentiations for me outside of the tech side is you, like how you see the world, how you're bringing this into fruition, your execution, your creativity, and most importantly, the end user feedback. And that is a lot in the UI, in brand. Like we put a lot of thinking in the brand, and I think that's what every early stage company should be doing, not just focusing on building product and saying, okay, I'll think about the brand when I have money. You don't need to have tons of money to have a nice brand. But I think, yeah, that many startups forget that this is a crucial part. And actually, your first clients, which you want to be referrals, will be the ones that will fall in love with the brand, because your product will be nothing in comparison to what it will be in a year or two when you get the money.
Yes.
So these are, I would say, the key things I can think of right now.
No, this is actually pretty good. And I like the emphasis that you made on the brand, right? Um, because I think we all say we don't judge a book by its cover. Okay. Everybody does. Here's an example. When you see someone with a shiny car, you're like, ah, this guy's probably pretty cool. Or this person, this lady, this person in this car is probably loaded or whatever, right? So I keep telling this to people, and I like that you're saying that. Branding is important. And I think a lot of startups are either not going all the way in, they're focusing on their product, which is also good, but the customer will interact with your product, which will be covered in a brand, right? And so it's an interesting point that you're enunciating that. And we've been going long but I want to open up a little bit for you. If so, you already told someone who's starting a company. Now, when you look at things from a different perspective, like, you're raising money right now as a founder, have you seen anything different since 2023? Like I have personally, but I want to ask someone in the field who is doing it right now. What are some things, and I think you talked about, traction, revenue, but are there, let's put it this way, is it more competitive than it was before 2023, 2022, or are things are looking a bit better for you in person or even for someone who is starting a company in 2024?
I think things are extremely difficult. I mean, I haven't talked to one founder that said this year they managed to raise easily. Like it's been extremely, extremely hard. You need to have tons and tons of meetings to get some checks in. And as a founder, the time is everything. So are you allocating time to talk to investors or to your clients or to the product meeting you have to do? Like it's very hard. I don't think it's being a founder in general, I don't think it's for everyone. Like it is
Yeah.
coming with ups and downs and a whole journey on its own. But especially the raising money part, I see that has been um, devastating for some people like that I know are later stage. Like let's say in our case, okay, we're a small team, we just started, but like if you had like 30, 50 people on staff and you really need that big Series
Yeah.
A to come in, it's devastating because it's a life or death situation, and that's why a lot of startups also didn't make it this year. But same for VCs. I
Yeah.
see bunch of VCs that not just have closed, but also are just allocating money in their portfolio companies. And it's kind of an unfair situation in the sense that they might take meetings because they want to actually know what's going on, but they're not allocating any money right now in new deals, or they kind of wasting your time, but it's vice versa too, because you do want to build those relationships,
Yeah.
but you're not there yet on a revenue standpoint for them to make the move. So it's kind of a dance that is tricky. And what I've noticed is that what like VCs say on their websites, let's say, it's not actually what's happening internally.
Yeah.
Like they say pre-seed, they invest in Series A. They say they invest in future of work, they invest in AI infrastructure. Like how is one supposed to make sense of any of that, right? Like it's very hard. And I see that you asked like about the change. The change is truly you need referrals from within that you know what they're doing, what they're working on, so you're more efficient. And you know exactly like what's that mark that you have to hit.
Hmm.
Um, and like in our case, I think like getting the meetings is not that hard,
Yeah.
but you also it's like closing a deal. Like you want to know immediately, are they in, are they not, like what's the
Yeah.
feedback. And many investors won't say that the first call, like they want to have you, you know, to see what's going on, but it's just not effective. And I the other thing I would add is that surprisingly, because you know female founders are not the time, so we kind of talk with each other. Like there hasn't been a lot of support from female VCs to female
Interesting.
founders. And the other thing, like I see, is like being on that side of like the market future of work.
Hmm.
Like everything you talk about is D&I and like how we're gonna, you know, have a better future. But on the fund side, you see not many things have changed internally. And rather than having them reply to every single like female founder that is emailing them or doing office hours or doing advice or helping somehow progress them and giving visibility, um, yeah, there's not that. There's not much feedback. I'll let you give your feedback, but I kind of see it with a couple of VCs starting now to promote more female founders.
Hmm.
But overall, like what I hear is that there hasn't been that support that you would have expected.
Hmm. I'm surprised. I'm actually not that surprised, but now I'm also processing what you're saying. Here's my thought. Okay,
Yes.
speculation. I'll wear my speculation hat. I think all the female-led VCs are probably having a hard time as well, right? So I'm thinking of this. Forget if they're female, right? Let's say myself, right? I have my own syndicate. And I think one problem that everybody would have is like, hey, they have their LPs. I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
maybe they want to invest in companies which are, I don't want to say the word more promising, but let's put it this way. Hey, this was backed by Sequoia. This was backed by Andreessen Horowitz. I am on that cap table. They're looking for that, possibly. That could be one thing. But I am a little bit surprised. Why is that? Because when you're saying that, because I always believe like being a female founder, I think things should become much more easier. Why? Because now there is not as much better ecosystem, which I kind of hate. Why is that not? But there should be a better ecosystem, right? Already like for women to back others, or even like who are VCs, they don't have to be female, supporting. Are you seeing that as a whole market space, that it's really hard to be a female founder? That's what I'm trying to ask. I'm also thinking as well, because I personally I have four sisters, right? All of them are working, and I know exactly what you're talking about, right? It
yeah.
is it's effing tough, right? And so I'm trying to understand is like why the support hasn't been there. Like for me, I don't see that. I see a great product. I don't care who is it, just back them. And if they're female or DEI based,
Yeah.
support them, because that way you're not tapping into a great skill, but you're opening a whole new world of people who have various skill sets who could be and highly possibly be very more successful than traditionalists. um I'm actually curious, yeah, what do you think? Why is that? Because I'm actually surprised you're saying this.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, I don't have the answers, but there's so much data like to prove exactly what you
Yeah, yeah.
said on the benefits. Like it's a known fact, and I mean, I see that you mentioned earlier, like how you would put that extra work, like that extra hour, for instance. I always did that. Like I work so hard, and I think it's something to be said about immigrants that they do that. I, I can't like I think going back and thinking of all the support like I've gotten building Dextego, it's definitely majority men, men that have probably females in their lives, like sisters, kids, something. Um, what is interesting is there's a lot of women that come to me for support,
Hmm.
even if they're older. Like
Yeah.
I think the community of women generally talks, like they're open for
Yeah.
feedback and saying, I need help. That's like the biggest thing in comparison to men related communities. And I'm part of like Feed League, and
Hmm.
there's a co-working place called Her Workplace that women then they're gathered for support. But when it comes to the startup world, it's not the corporate support. It's different. It's like you need
Hmm.
intro to VCs. You need like a good client. It's different support, and that I don't see. I don't know exactly why, because like the corporate type of support would entail usually okay coaching you on how to get that better raise,
Yeah.
right, or like getting you a referral to get a new job. It's low stakes, but it
Yeah.
seems to me like with the VC world and the startup world, it's like a previous female founder, let's say, is one of the very few. So if C has succeeded, there might be an internal fear that if I help that other female founder now, they take that spotlight. Maybe, I'm losing mine, which should not be at all. Like this, it's not competition. Like you won, right? Like let someone
Yeah.
else win. Um, I don't know because always there's exceptions, but I think from what also others are experiencing and sharing with me that there's a hesitation to devote time to coach and to support. Maybe to your point, it is that they're also struggling, and so you can't ask for more. That's what they can do. Um, it's very interesting, and I don't like it. I mean, if I one day have a VC, I will only support minorities and women and immigrants for every reason you discussed.
Yeah.
It's it's something indeed that I wasn't expecting. I'll tell you that. Like I thought that it would be easier, exactly, but it hasn't. I also think that the fact that I don't have a long like career of big successes because I'm young could be another factor, which is also some sort of differentiation, because when you get that young kids who said from YC that they also are just doing it for
Yeah.
the first time, it's like the same bet you're making. I don't know.
It's interesting. I think it look, all good companies were founded by folks who were very young, right? Like I'm gonna
Yeah.
take that. But then when you take that, most of them are men. Some of them are women, which I mean, I don't have the data in front of me, just
Yeah.
FYI, right? So I'm not just seeing from what when you hit me up and you're like, Imran, what were the like founders of the like what were their ages when they founded the companies? You think of, they were young, and you think of Facebook, you think of possibly Google, you have Apple.
Yeah,
These are
yeah,
all the
yeah.
good big companies. But then there's companies like Bumble, right? I'm actually look, it's disappointing. I honestly feel disappointed with this scenario because not only as a female woman, you have to go through this. I have to just say it, like the shithole, right? It's just not a
Mhm.
good place to be. Um, what do you think can change? Like, so here's what I will say. Like, whenever I have worked with women in workforce or anything, or actually, my first person who gave me job in the United States was a woman founder, and
Mm,
she raises a fund successfully, not like a fund for her startup. And I worked for her, and I saw the way she worked, right? And I
mm.
think that's something I'm very proud of. Like, hey, that's she gave me my first big break in the Silicon Valley. How do you think like this could be resolved? Like, because what you're saying is I'm not hearing it for the first time. What bothers me, it's there. I keep hearing there's stuff out there, their organization, and like you said, you just count like easy 5, 6, 10 plus right in your hands. Like there's a organization, there are co-working spaces, there are VC women-led, there's women-led mentorship, there's all this good stuff. Why it's still not working? What's broken? Like I
Yeah.
can't answer that, but
Yeah, I can't remember which visit it was, but I had seen one online that came up and said, we're tired of the fact that there's no transparency on like LP's money, or like where it's going, how it's the fund is doing, and that they started sharing all these stats on their website. And that made me think that if actually the ones that say they support women shared all these stats, and we saw how many of the people they invested in, for instance, exited or became successful, we would have more insight on where is the problem. Is it really that there's no initial openings of doors, or is that there's not sustainable support and they fail? Like, I also
hmm,
don't know. So I think the first thing that needs to change is that transparency on tracking and sharing this information. Um, there is a very interesting presentation that the founder of Philip did at Disrupt HR when I went some months ago, and I've also seen it. When a woman ends up being on the C-suite, like they making it in whatever way,
hmm,
there is this weird phenomenon that for them to survive, they become like the rest. So they don't want to stand out. They don't want to be the
hmm,
ones that have to bring along all other women, and they don't want to carry that baggage.
hmm,
And sometimes they become the same as if you were talking to a man.
hmm,
That's basically her presentation in short. Um, and it's so interesting. And I think that we're talking about it, like it frustrates me so much. Like, I can't believe we're even having this conversation, like
yeah,
that it's a topic we have to deal with. But why it's a factor or it's a stigma if I say, yes, I'm a woman and I want to work with another woman. Let's say I'm an engineer. I don't
yeah,
want to be around like 100 men and I'm the only woman. I'm making
yeah,
this choice. It is biased, but it's fair. because
Yeah.
I don't feel like, let's say, safe, or I don't feel like I can be going on a break and want to talk about my boyfriend to a woman, whatever the case could be. I think there should be this option for women in this power to say, I'm choosing, like, let's say I'm a fund. I want 10 female founders in every year. I
Yeah.
want, ex-employees to be women. And it has to be that some women put these rules and abide by them so that others see, oh, look what she did. I can do the same in my organization. But it has to come communally. Like if only certain women do it, here and there, it won't be enough of an impact to change anything. And I haven't seen any such rules be applied, or if they're applied, they're not shared. So they're not creating a momentum. That's, I think, the low-hanging fruit, like making it more visible and making some choices that others can follow.
So I have a question. So I have seen like there was one company I worked for, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they actually have a process in place where they, report, it's I think I don't know which report was it. I think it was part of like diversity, equity, inclusion, all that good
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And they would make sure that they hire certain women and certain, female founders or female-led organization. And I'd really see them. I even added this one of the managers who I was on reporting to, but she became a part of the C-suite, and I love her for that because she promotes a lot
Mm.
of other women who try to join C-suites. I respect her for that. But you are right, but then there's a question is also right. Like these all companies are doing it. Like when you look at the big companies, they are. I think where it's falling off possibly is the companies which are not that public. They're more private. Even if they're private, they're not that big enough. So like, Stripe is a very big private company. You can cut that into half. I think companies lower than that possibly are just like, we need people. I don't care,
Right.
right? Um, I'm just speculating, right? Like because
Yeah.
I've seen there is a whole report that all these companies release every year to make sure they're hiring immigrants, what do you call minorities, people of color, all that good stuff. But I think when it comes to female-led founders, specifically just for the startup world, right? I think there is probably not that much transparency. Again, I'm just saying based on what I'm listening and also like what I've heard and seen.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe there's a way for them to do what you're saying, like bring more transparency on the table.
Yeah. While you were talking now, you made me think there is a company in France that is building like an internal daycare so
Hmm.
that basically they wanted to promote a woman, but she was saying, hey, I don't know, my baby, this and that. And they said, no worries, we'll build in a daycare
Yeah.
for you. These incentives are very important. Like, for instance, a company that wants indeed to hire women, they have to make job descriptions that make the woman want to apply.
Hmm.
Like they have to speak their language too. And on the female founder side, what's interesting is that if, let's say, you do have a family, babies and stuff, then it becomes very hard to do anything really, but let alone a startup. And then on the younger side, I think something else that might be happening is, the classic thing they say in psychology, like that women want to have all the facts first. They like want to take their time. They want to be sure about what they say versus like a man will go in an interview and say, yeah, I'm the best, like get me.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
but
I didn't
yeah,
know this.
they say this, and like they were making fun of like female founders, let's say, presenting your TAM, like that they'll do all these like calculations versus a man will just put a number and say, yeah, that's my TAM. Anyway, the point is that if these funds also that want to find these women had ways to attract them, like to say, hey, like we're building this programming, we'll help with XYZ afterwards. Maybe they were more prone to also taking the risk. Like maybe there's not also enough women that are willing to put themselves out there and like their ideas. Yeah, I think it's hard to put yourself out there. Like I feel like again, like I was always like that. I have this personality. I'm not afraid of rejection. I like
Yeah.
ask for help. I put myself out there. I think what we're doing is much more important than me as Ioanna, so it doesn't matter. But I know like that not many females think like that. It's like a lot of overthinking and doubting. And the imposter syndrome exists for any
Yeah.
founder. So if you add that on top of being a female that wants to have all the facts and
Yeah.
know what you're doing, when entrepreneurship is 90 times out of 100, you probably have to guess and make an educated guess. It's very hard. So something along those lines, that there needs to be language that attracts them, and also support network, and then
Yeah.
transparency after that to see what happened.
Yeah, no, and I think what you're hitting upon is like one thing that comes to my mind, and then we will probably end, is basically maybe they have to put there are things already in place by big companies. They make sure there's, equity for everybody, just as, all that good stuff. But I think what they have to do on the startup founder side is like, hey, if we have female founders, they have a great product, let's invest in them. If they're missing certain skills, let's
Well,
invest. Yeah.
yes,
And I
yes.
think that has to be more evident, more big push. Um, Especially, I think that should be the case. You should not, I don't know the right word, but like you should not ignore anybody, or should not like, be like, hey, for me, I think one of the things when we talked, I'm like, is your product works? I quickly take everything out the equation, because I think for me it's like, if you have a compelling product, I don't care who you are, where you're from, you're an amazing person. Let's invest. So I try to nullify that, but I think there's something for me as well. I should even make that a point. Like, hey, more women should be getting more platform, or even like getting invested or get introductions or whatever it takes. Before we end, you had a last discussion, was a very nice one actually. But what advice, or what is something that you want to share with someone? Um,
Mm.
could be anything, and you can say two, three things if you want to, because I always want to make sure that there's an impact with all of these podcasts, that there are other hustlers, founders, innovators listening, what is that they can take away?
Yeah. I answered this today actually in a post on LinkedIn, that someone asked, like, out of 10, how open are you on asking someone for advice? And I said 8.5, I think, out of 10. And they said, have you always been like that? And I think since I was very young, I understood that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Like, you have to take a step forward and always keep going. There'll never be the perfect timing for anything. So I think you just gotta believe in yourself and project that belief so that others also feel it. I think everything starts from inside. Like, your mind is everything. And to me, I've done Reiki in the past. I really try to visualize. And if you hear like Tony Robbins or any big coach talk, they'll speak about the power of visualization, like for athletes too. So I think you have to spend like at least 10 minutes a day just visualizing your future. Because if you don't see it, you won't make it, and no one else can make you see it. So I really think self-awareness and taking the time to understand what you have to work on to get to that vision is important. Obviously, that's the premise of Dextego too, helping you like understand your soft skills and develop them. So that's all I preach every day. It's like, we can work on ourselves. We're a work in progress, and um, just don't take no for an answer. Like, it's just not your no. Like, your yes is somewhere. You just have to find that
Yeah.
yes. And whether that's a client, an investor, a partner, anything, I do think that challenges come to those who can handle them. So we shouldn't focus on the negatives rather than on the opportunities that come across us to get to the next level.
Wow, this is, I'm gonna make a TikTok out of this one. It's people need to hear this, especially with what's going on around the world.
Mm,
But no, thank you, Iona,
thank
and thank you for having this discussion. Hopefully to have you again, when you have also, moved further along with your product. and,
Yes.
have a different discussion about the future of Dextego. But thank you, and have a good day.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, Imran.